That's how he saw himself. And as we begin to go through this book, one of the things that's going to come up again and again and again is our viewpoint really matters. Our viewpoint of what and who and why and how, I mean, it matters. And we're going to see Job's viewpoint again and again and again is dependent on the blessings of God. And we'll start to see when he begins to challenge and struggle, what changes is his viewpoint of God. And so we'll begin to see that as we get a little bit further in the book. So we spent some time, we looked at Job. Then we took a week and we looked at Satan, and we saw Satan as a fierce foe, a wise enemy. Just listen to this title, Prince of the Power of the Air. Now that sounds pretty powerful to me. But we also saw him as a limited guy. He's a foe, and he's powerful, and he's wise, and he's smart, and he's fast, and he's a lot of things. But Brother Hank, he has to live his life playing the Father May I game. You know, it's may I. We run around with don't touch me stickers. Oh, I just thought with can't touch this. That would have been so much better. We run around with these big stickers, and you can't. He can't. He's got to say, may I. And that's so encouraging to realize that if we will faithfully, continually, dependently live inside this hedge that God has provided for us, and that starts with a big if we will, then we're going to be that city set on a hill. But the scary part is that we can give place to the devil. Matt, although he wants to put you inside a hedge, you can leave the back door open. And if you leave it open, the devil will be faithful to come in. And the lion will do what lions do. They will rip and destroy and tear to shreds the weakest in that house. And then when they're done, they'll turn their attack on everyone else who's in there. Because the lion's going to just destroy it all. And so it's very important for us to understand and get that viewpoint that we are dependent. Now, I had a couple people ask me, well, just one actually, the last 2 weeks, both weeks, say, why have we not looked at God? Well, Brother Moyer, it's my hope that we look at God and we see God in every picture here. Okay, the great challenge and great benefit of the book of Job is to learn to see God in everything. Okay, it's a challenge because we established pretty well Job's a great man, right? Do you know when Job saw God in all this? Chapter 42, verse 5. And see, that's the challenge. When we try to jump in and snapshot it, we can mess up a whole lot of things. In fact, the world and a lot of Christians take a look at Job and they snapshot this book. And then they come up with all kind of crazy conclusions that, like this book, I mean, if you study and read too many commentaries, you're going to find a lot of them say, this book there's a lot to be learned from this book, Rob, but it's not historical. It's a story that we can learn from because it can't be historical. You see, if this book was historical, then we would have a God that allows innocent men and innocent girls to suffer. We would have a God that allows his faithful to hurt. If this story is reality, then God is unconcerned with human life. He is ruthless. This just can't be historical. Well, I'm going to tell you, the problem there is we're not seeing God as God. We're seeing God as man. All right, here's the very beginning point, something we have to understand, that God is God. In God is all life, right? So God determines the length or brevity of every single life. But just think about it. God determines the length or brevity of every single... You want that job? So we don't like how he determined it in A, B, or C. If it would have happened differently at a different time in a different way, would that make it okay? You know, we try to make, we start to think about this, and when we do, you know, if we're honest, you know, those kids died, and that just, something, You know, it's almost like these innocent kids died. If God was a man, he'd be on trial for murder. He'd be guilty of something, but he's not man. You see, this is part of God being God. This is something that has to be seen in the very beginning of the book. It's something that's going to be taught on every single page of this book. We try to hold him accountable for how we think life should be. Be careful, because we started last week when we looked at the devil. One of the devil's philosophies is, I'm owed, I deserve. When we start to determine, see, it's all based upon the fact that man's innocent. Well, Brother Maddox, is man a sinner or is man innocent? Anything but hell, is it grace and mercy? Or are we owed and do we deserve? Brother Moore, I can get the answers on the test right, but living those answers out sometimes become problematic. See, we'll start to see what Job means when I used to know you by the hearing of the ears, but now I see you. So this whole idea of a snapshot view can be destructive. Because then this person's bad and I should be, and we know it's God's desire that all come to salvation. 2 Peter 3:9, God is not the Lord. Oh, Eric, I didn't know if you would get that fast. That's good, because I might have messed up the middle. I remember when I was in school, I messed up the middle. The Lord is not slack concerning his promise, as some men count slackness. I always leave that part out. But is long-suffering to usward, not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to the knowledge of repentance. Justin, we know that this is his desire. This is what he wants. So taking a snapshot view is dangerous. It's a problem. And that snapshot view turns right into life. It's why did my son get hit by a truck? Why does grandma have cancer? Why did my company close down? 33 years, why am I unemployed? Why did this house get flooded? Why did this one burn down? We begin to evaluate God based on what man desires. And that's a problem. To even begin to evaluate our immediate circumstance, we have to begin with the idea that God is God. Now, when I started looking at this reminded me of something I read a long time ago when I was reading Francis Schaeffer. Francis Schaeffer wrote a book called The Christian Manifesto. I would advise anybody in here to read it. It was written, I think it was 1981. 1980, Tim LaHaye wrote a book called The Battle for the Mind. It's one of the first books I read completely through that I wasn't, didn't have to by a teacher who checked every page, because otherwise I was cheating in that too. But I read the book Tim LaHaye wrote, The Battle for the Mind. The Battle for the Mind is about humanism and its influence on public education today. And in it, it ties a lot back to the history of education. I mean, if you can Google, I did do this. Eric, did I send you those screenshots? I want the other one. Give me the other one first. Did I send you two? Okay, give me the other one first. And this is what I did this morning. I just Googled this, and you can do it. Don't talk out loud. But just go, who is the father of modern education in America? Boom, this will be what pops up. Okay, the father of modern education in America, consensus is going to be John Dewey. Here's the problem, John Dewey. John Dewey in 1933 was basically the writer of the Humanist Manifesto. Kind of like the Communist Manifesto, followed right behind it. The Humanist Manifesto begins with the idea that there is no God, and that man in and of himself can create his own utopia. Okay, this has been pumped into our school system since the teacher of teachers in 1933 started teaching it. And it has been pumped in and pumped in and pumped in. Well, in 1980, I read this book, and it was all about the danger of humanism inside the schools. And I'm going to throw this out there real quick. This is what happened. That information went out. And Lorraine, what we did is we pulled all of our kids out of the schools. And I understand why. I mean, Brother Bill, I've taught that lesson. I'm not going to send my David to be raised by the Philistines. Okay, I understand that argument. But I never gave much sense to, God sent Daniel to the Babylonians. And he sent Joseph to the Egyptians. Today, I now struggle with maybe I should have made sure my Eric was a Daniel. I don't have the answer. In fact, really, I don't go. I go to a church that has a Christian school. My kids went to Christian school. If you're going to wonder which side I end up leaning on, it's pretty easy. But man, I do struggle with that. And it's not to say one's right or one's wrong. I would just go to say this. Maybe when we give people advice of what they should do, we should be less arrogant in saying this is the only way, and spend more time saying you should pray. You should seek God's face. You should follow his leading, because he does send some missionaries into the mission field, even at 16. And maybe my job should have been to prepare instead of pull out. Where would our country be today, 50 years later, if we didn't abandon, if we would have fought on their territory? I don't know those answers. Brother Hamilton, it just makes me want to be more humble in how I answer people's questions, less... Maybe this humility thing is really important for Christianity. Just a good picture. But anyway, Francis Schaeffer, back to Francis Schaeffer, because that's where all this stuff started. Francis Schaeffer would write this. He would say, when we're talking about witnessing, when we're trying to share the gospel, the first argument for the gospel is not that Jesus died for our sins, which, I don't know, I was 16, 17 years old, so, this was like, yes, it is. And it's not even that God loves us and has a wonderful plan for our lives. The first argument for the gospel is that God is, because that's where it all must begin. And then it goes from God is to God is God. And through this book of Job, the lesson is again and again, God is God. He is not man. He does not think our way, and he is God. When we get that viewpoint, the whole book starts with what? Us getting a viewpoint of heaven that we don't always get, seeing that God is involved even in our challenges, even in our trials. That viewpoint begins to change things. God is in control of our trials. God has a purpose for our trials. Justin, this changes everything. Okay, what right do I have to complain? Now you know the point. When I complain, I'm complaining about God. Half the time, those are empty words, unless you realize God is God and he's in control. Now, that's exactly who I'm complaining about. That's exactly where my murmuring is going. We begin to see that, and that's our challenge throughout the entire book. I just want to kind of set that stage a little bit, because we're going to continue to see it. Job chapter 2. And we want to go through this. I want to take a look at Job's wife. Again, there was a day, and verses 1 through 3, they pretty much sound the same. We get a glimpse of the heavenlies. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came up also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord, saying, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. He does not cease to search and destroy. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect man, an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? And still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Matt, scary. You know who brings up Job again? God does. It's God who says, let's talk about Job. It's not Satan who brings this up. It's God one more time. And Satan answered the Lord and said, here we see Satan's philosophy. We're going to see again. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. Starts to say the same thing. Man is basically selfish. All he cares about is me, 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 me. You start touching that me. You start dealing with the me. He's going to curse you to your face. And again, I'm going to tell you, be careful, because anger and bitterness are one way we can leave the back door open, and another is living his philosophy. This whole me, 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 what about me? It will destroy everything we say matters to us. Satan goes on, verse 5, but put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh. You just didn't go far enough. You didn't let me go far enough. And he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Notice Satan has to say, can we change the rules? You know, last time we had a deal. You said only go this far. Well, I went this far. You didn't let me go far enough. May I please go a little further? Because if you let me go further, I'll prove to you that in his core, he is selfish and all he cares about is him. You do not matter. God says, no. Justin, this is one of the things that we leave out. God's God, right? You think he didn't know how this was going to work out? You think he didn't know Job's heart? You think he didn't know that there was going to be a Job 42:5? No, he knew. And he doesn't tempt you or I above what we're able. But he is more concerned with our growth than our comfort. Verse 7, so Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown, head to toe. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. That's Job. That's Job's response. Job was stricken with a terrible disease. Most people are going to say this is leprosy. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Sure sounds like some of it is the more you go into the book. But if it is, I want you to understand this, that makes it even tougher, because not only does he have the pain and the struggle, but people have to stay away from him. They're living by the 6-foot rule. No mass, but 6 feet. That was terrible, by the way. Thanksgiving, hugging and seeing people is much better than 6 feet away or on a computer, on your phone. Verse 9, then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Verse 10, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So, I want to look at Job's wife in 15 minutes. And I want to start by saying this. Justin, I'm not agreeing with what she said. Okay, that's true. I'm not agreeing. So please don't say, Brother Jeremy said. No, I'm not agreeing with what she said. I'm agreeing that she should not have said it. But before I throw a rock at her, I would say, would the first person in here who's never opened up their mouth and said something they shouldn't have, please stand up and testify? Who in the midst of a trial or a storm has not let their mouth run off ahead of their head and follow the emotions of their heart? And we weren't anywhere close to what she's been through in days. I do want to look at her. It starts by looking at Job's reaction in verse 10, because it's one that's not understood many times. It's verse 9, then said his wife unto him, dost thou still remain thine integrity? Job, curse God and die. No, I'm going to tell you, that means curse God and bring death to thyself. Like kill you, like just let go. Do what you have to do to free yourself from this mess. That's what's going on here. And people read this and Rob hear this, and he told her, you're being a fool. He did not call his wife a fool. That is not what he said. Fool, especially in the Old Testament, does not mean ignorant or without knowledge. It means without God. It means separate apart from God. What he said was, wife, you're acting like the heathen. And then he goes on, this is where we're going to end up, hopefully, to remind her, God's been good to us. Justin, he's not smacking her. He's lovingly trying to help her. He's saying, we talked about that, I think, last week. He's saying, put on your God glasses. Look above what you see right here. This is not a rebuke. You know, I do think of women in the Bible. She gets a raw deal. Job, up till this point, maybe the greatest thing we see in Job is his reaction right here to his wife. Rob, he does not rebuke her. This is a picture of truth and love. Job had victory here, and he turned and wanted to bring her with him. Let me remind you, God's been good to us. I don't want you living as the heathen. I don't want you viewing as the heathen. I don't want you letting Satan in. City on a hill, wife. It's where we'll be. But Bill, this is love. When I look at Job's wife, I see a struggling saint. And Matt, I can associate with that. In fact, I'll go so far as to say, I think the reason we like making her this evil, wicked woman is because we don't have to associate with her then. I don't have to try to learn anything from this. I don't have to look at a person who's broken if I just make her bitter. I don't have to look at her suffering if I make her sarcastic. This is all just for you. Put all these words in line. I don't have to look at her pain if I just make her profane. So, Brother Bill, it's a whole lot easier just to make her a bad, wicked woman. Job's good and go on. Not look at God, not look at his control, not look at the situation, not look at anything. But that's not what we're going to do because that's not how we learn any lessons. If we start with the fact that Mrs. Job was a good woman, then we get to ask the question, what brought her to this place? Now, Brother Moyer, we get to take that out one step further and say, what makes people who know God say or do what we say or do in the valleys? Because that's what we want to try to learn from here. Or protect ourselves from. So a couple things we got to remember. We got to remember what's going on in Mrs. Job's life. Mrs. Job's home has just been destroyed. They've been married. How long were they married? I don't know, long enough to have 10 kids. Long enough to become the greatest family in the East. Long enough to learn a few things. Long enough to have a few promises. Katie and Jade, they both got married, not to each other, but they both got married this year. And this is what happens. Jade's going to remember everything Eric promised her. Our life will be like. And Katie didn't hear any of the promises Josh said our life was going to be like. They've lived long enough that she's received every one of those promises. She's picked out the right curtains and she's had the right door and they have built a life. And in one day, it's all stripped away. Retirement's gone. Security's gone. Comfort gone. Her home, everything she has built for at least 25, 30 years, gone. She's confused. She's broken. She's scared. She's fearful. What are we going to do now? Where are we going to sleep? What are we going to eat? What about tomorrow? And that's like first. That's the easiest thing she's having to deal with because she goes right from this picture of my home is destroyed to her children are dead. Not sick. Not in sin. Brother Maddox, sick, there's hope of getting better. In sin, there's hope of repentance. They're dead. She has stood in front of 10 bodies and held a hand and said, "Goodbye, my son. Goodbye, my daughter." She looks where their security used to be, and there's 10 gravestones. I've only buried a few people. Angie's father, very influential to me. My father, grandparents. The thing at every funeral is, I'll be fine, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. There is a point when the reality comes in that I can't call them, that I can't say I'm sorry, that I can't hug them. Jay, there's a point that makes me cherish the moments that I've misused. She's doing it times 10. Times she might have said, oh, I'm too busy to come over. I mean, imagine what she is going through at this time. We feel for Job. In the midst of his valley, we feel for Job. It's easy for me to associate with Job. Brother Wayne, I love my boys. I have sacrificed for my boys. I would sacrifice more for my boys. I have spent their lifetime trying to make them prepared for life. I want them to understand that they need to take responsibility, that they need to love others, that they need to not get stuck in a me situation. In fact, I would tell you, bowl of blessings. Well, there wouldn't be time for anyone else to talk. I have been greatly blessed of God. But Matt, I would put at the top of that list, well, I'll put them both together. How about that? Being called dad by my boys with their mom is the greatest blessing. Okay. I've probably spoiled my boys. I mean, as long as we're talking, I'll go ahead and admit it. I've spoiled my boys. Donnie, I want my boys to want to be around me more than anybody else, especially when they were younger. I wanted them to be home more than they wanted to be anywhere else, especially when they were younger. But the more you understand, I love my boys. But it's not like mom. There's something different. And I know that. I watch her heart break when I'm just moving to solve the problem. It's different. She was a mom, and she has 10 graves. Let me say this too. I don't know why I say these things. Trivia probably get tired of me bragging about those two girls. I can't help it. I prayed for those two girls for 20 years. One of the things that happens when you first get married, I know there's leave and cleave. You ever heard of leave and cleave? You have? Usually it's the women who've heard of leave and cleave more than the men. Usually. It's an easy thing to do, to say, okay, Donnie, I know you love your mom and dad, but what about me? What about me? What about me? Well, I'm thankful I have two girls who don't do that. Well, I will tell you this. There is a leave and cleave. I actually like teaching on leave and cleave. I do. But, Matt, there is no time limit on that thing that came down from Mount Sinai. You know, honor thy father and thy mother. No time limit. It's there forever. And you know what happens? You better be careful living that life of me, because you know who's coming in the back door. You better find a way that it's us loving others, not us working against each other inside the home, taking sides. Anyway, I'm thankful I don't have that problem. In fact, even yesterday, Jade came over. I looked outside. She's carrying all these Christmas things down from outside of the shed. Jade and Eric getting them outside. I thought, oh, that's so sweet. Should I help her or go inside? I just want you to see that this woman's stuck in pain. what we really should be doing, we should be seeing this woman and going to Galatians 6, brethren, if a man be overtaken in a fault. Okay, yes, she said something stupid. You, which are spiritual, share some understanding, some compassion, some mercy, some grace. Let's help her. But too often we just want to crucify her. She lost her family. She lost her home. She lost her children. And now there she is looking at her sweetheart, sitting in ashes, scraping. What's she supposed to say? No, what's she supposed to say? She's at a time where there's nothing she can say. And there's times really we should stop and listen when there's nothing when we don't know what to say, we probably should say nothing. That's usually when we say the wrong thing. When we don't know what to say, it's a good time to pray and lift that one up. When we don't know what to say, it's a good time to seek some counsel. It would have been a good thing if she said nothing. But I understand. That's not just any man sitting in the ashes. That's her soulmate. That's her husband. That's the love of her life. That's the one she had built a life upon. It is, I'm gonna run out of time, but I got 7 minutes. It's too easy. I'm gonna give you another story. Man, I'm giving you another story. Ready? I try not to give you too many stories, but this one's gonna make me cry. It's too easy to criticize caregivers. And that's what she was. And right now, everyone she gave care to is dead or suffering. I mean, if this is leprosy, you know what that is? That's a death sentence. She's never seen anyone cured from leprosy. What does he have to live for? This is almost like a mercy killing him. She's giving him freedom to go on. My 2 years ago, it's 3 years ago now. My dad dies 3 years ago, Christmas Day. My mom had to make the decision for them to take him off the respirator. And doctors pushed her for a week. And finally she just said, okay. And my brother, furious at her, didn't want to go to the funeral, was running around talking to every family member about how she killed my dad. Just crushed her even more. But more, let me tell you, my mom took care of my dad for years. He was angry and grouchy and hated having to be taken care of. She had to get him a drink. She had to lay his clothes out. She had to help him get into the room. She helped him plan out his day. She reminded him what he did yesterday and who he said what to. He got pneumonia. He went in the hospital. He went from the hospital to convalescent care. She went every day to convalescent care. They live in Clarksville. It was at the north end of Hopkinsville. You know that's not a fun drive. Every day sitting there beside him, nothing she can do. Sometimes not because of lack of oxygen. He couldn't even remember anything. He's drawing things on the wall with his feces. She's listening to the stories from the nurses about how ugly he is. On and on and on. It went on for like a year and a half. Donnie, she's got doctors after a year and a half, after years of taking care of him, saying, he'll never come out of here. All you're doing is prolonging his agony. My brother still wants to run around and say, but she was mean to him. You don't know how she talked to him at this time or that time. You mean when he was out of his mind? I've been in church long enough to listen to people complain about caregivers. We should be very careful complaining about caregivers until we've done it. Because Justin, I'm going to tell you, this woman, she's just tired. There's her dearest on earth upon everything else. And he's suffering. And she said, it's okay, honey. And then that brought her to the point where she just lost her confidence. She was just devastated. There's no hope. She's trying to make the best of it that she can. Again, she's speaking when she should have prayed. Who's never done that? I do want to throw this out. I only got 3 minutes, but it's one of those cute little things. Job sitting on the ashes. Oh, close. I got to close. I don't have time to do all this. But there's 2 things. We'll close with 2 thoughts. Here you go. First thought. Job sitting on the ashes, scraping himself with a potsherd. You know what a potsherd is? It's a broken piece of pottery. You know this was no good until it was broken. It was only useful because it was broken. Brother Bill, sometimes you and I, we're only useful after we've been broken. How much more useful do you think Job was after he got to 42, verse 5? It's one of the things we should keep in mind. And then I'll give you this other thing. She lost hope, and she gave in, and she lost heart, and she said, Job, just let go. But I want you to notice where she found Job. Job was sitting in the ashes. Now, you know what ashes are? They're leftover remnants from the fire. Now, you know where we saw Job in chapter 1? At the fire pit. Priest of the family, offering burnt offerings. But more, I believe, with everything in my heart. You know where Job went? Back to where he saw God. Back to where he worshiped God. And then with everything that's in him, he's trying to bring his wife with him. And if there's a lesson for us right here, that's the lesson. We need to remember and spend our time going back to where we saw God. Back to where he dealt with us. I wish I had more time, but I don't. But Billy, close in a word of prayer this morning.